Good evening, friends. Today we come to the last lecture series arranged in association with the International Translation Day. Today, Samyukta brings to you two talks. The first one would be by Dr. Sulfia Santhosh. She would be speaking on the title The Star of Star Theatre, Binodini Dasi. Dr. Sulfia Santhosh is currently working as Assistant Professor at the Research Department of English, TKM College of Arts and Science, Kollam. She finished her post-graduation from Institute of English, University of Kerala. She also has MPhil and PhD degrees from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. She has published research papers and monographs on her research area of life writing. She has also served as resource persons on the same in seminars organized by various colleges across Kerala. She has also experience in text material preparation for the State Literacy Mission as well as for the School of Distance Education BA English program. Her talk will be followed by a talk on the title Accessing the Past, the Challenges of Translating Binodini Dasi's Autobiography. This talk will be handled by Suddhaseel Sen, who teaches literature in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Bombay, where he has recently introduced courses on music. Dr. Sen is the author of a monograph, Shakespeare in the World, Cross-Cultural Adaptation in Europe and Colonial India, 1850 to 1900, and has published articles and book chapters on adaptations and cross-cultural exchanges in the fields of literature and music. Dr. Sen has also arranged Indian music for Western ensembles in India, Canada, and the US. More details about his academic work can be found under his webpage at IIT Bombay. We at Samyukta hope that this week was interesting, academically scintillating to all our listeners.
Hello everyone, I'm Sulfia and I'll be talking about Binodini Dasi's autobiography. The task assigned to me is to speak about the autobiography before another speaker starts talking about the translation process. Now, before I begin, I want to thank Samyukta Research Foundation for giving me this window of time to speak about something that I am very passionate about. So thank you for that, and especially Jayashree ma'am, who is an expert in pulling people out of the rut and making them speak about their research. Anyways, having said that, so Binodini Dasi. I don't know how many of you listening to me right now know about Binodini Dasi, so I'll just give you some basics. So she is one of the stars of Bengali public theatre in the colonial times. Like if you've noticed the brochure, if you've taken a look at the brochure, you'll see that I've titled my tiny session as the Star of Star Theatre, Binodini Dasi. So earlier, before this title was finalized, I had actually given the title The Star of Star Theatre, Glimpse into a Vedana Gatha. Okay, so not excuse my Bengali pronunciation because obviously I'm not a native speaker of Bengali, but yeah, I had given that flamboyant title because these are the first two words that came to my mind: Star Theatre and Vedana Gatha. For very good reason, I'll go into that. So this was a flamboyant title that I had suggested at the beginning, but Varsha very intelligently edited that and made it into this very pleasing title. So yeah, when you take a look at the title, it's kind of automatic to assume that Binodini Dasi acted in plays by the Star Theatre, or her plays were performed at the Star Theatre. Now that's a little bit misleading. I mean, I want to focus on that part first before I go into the personal details of her life. So Binodini Dasi performed in the National Theatre and the Bengali Theatre. And she had a very long life. She died at the age of 70. But in those 70 years, she was active in theatre for 12 years, only for 12 years. And during that 12 years, she performed mainly in National Theatre and Bengali Theatre. So why Star Theatre? Star Theatre is basically Binodini Dasi compensating for the fact that she couldn't perform on stage anymore, because female actors come with an expiration date. So once she was pushed out of the stage, Star Theatre is how she managed to capture her passion for the public theatre. So the when I call Binodini Dasi the star of Star Theatre, it's a little bit misleading, but I think it is accurate to capture the kind of passion that this woman felt for theatre. So Binodini Dasi's life narratives has been published in the form of 2 books. There is My Story, that's the first one, and then there is My Life as an Actress. So My Story was published in 1912, and My Life as an Actress came a decade later. So from the title itself, you can kind of assume the content of these 2 life narratives. My Story is about her personal life, and My Life as an Actress is about her life in the theatre, as in her public performances and how she was groomed, etc. Now in the 21st century, we know that it's not exactly possible to disconnect and categorize the personal and the public, so to speak. So there is this public image of an actress, and then My Story deals with what happens behind stage. That kind of a clear distinction is not possible, we all know that. So My Story, okay, so earlier I said I had chosen the title. The second part of my flamboyant title was A Glimpse into a Vedana Gatha. Now, personally speaking, my first impression was a little bit disappointing when I first read the life narrative My Story, titled My Story, Amar Jiban in Bengali. It was a little bit disappointing because for me, a 21st century privileged woman who had led a more or less secure life, it felt a little whiny, like she was constantly complaining and she was constantly despairing. But when you move on, when you read into the pain, or when you read through the pain, you understand certain things, and that comes with a little more matured reading, a little more seasoned reading. So My Story is very personal, in the sense she's talking about her personal tragedies, like the loss of her child, the death of her mentor, Girish Chandra Ghosh. So, and betrayals by, people in the theatre business, or, in the drama business. So such personal tragedies and betrayals find space in My Story. Now, one of the things that is predominant in the life narrative is that she is trying to efface herself, and at the same time she is trying to claim an agency for herself through the act of writing. So on the one hand, you have this woman who has declared right in the beginning that she is going to write a Vedana Gatha. I mean, I am not using the term, I did not coin this term. This is the term used in the life narrative itself, that it's going to be a song of pain or the story of pain. And she's constantly trying to efface herself. There is a constant attempt to towards self-effacement and denigration. I mean, there is this self-condescension, but on the other hand, you see this incredibly proud woman, like somebody who began as a misfit in the context of the public theatre, Bengali public theatre, and who made a space for herself and who takes immense pride in that particular accomplishment. So this mixture of this, there is this mixture of registers in the autobiography. There is this mixture of pride and pain in the autobiography. Now at this point, I'd like to read an excerpt from the English translation of the autobiography. The translation was done by Rimli Bhattacharya. So this is how the autobiography ends. Okay, like I said, in the beginning of the autobiography itself, she's declared that this is going to be a story of pain. It's going to be a Vedana Gatha. And this is how my story, Amar Jiban, ends. I have written for my own consolation, perhaps for some unfortunate woman who, taken in by deception, has stumbled onto the path of hell. Because I have no relations, I am despised. I am a prostitute, a social outcast. There is no one to listen or to read what I feel within. That is why I have let you know my story in pen and paper. Like my own tainted and polluted heart, I have tainted these pure white pages with writing. But what else could I do? A polluted being can do nothing other than pollute. This is how my story ends, in this extremely apologetic, self-effacing, condescension towards the self. So there are these whole lot of contradictions within the life narrative itself. Now I'm saying that is, I'm not saying that is something unusual, because obviously as human beings we go through these ups and downs of various emotions, so that is totally okay. But what I am trying to say is that there is this plethora of emotions, but the dominant emotions are definitely one of self-effacement and pain and a feeling of loss. Now another thing that is very much highlighted in the autobiography is this sense of not belonging. Now it's very evident that right from her first performance, Binodini Dasi was in love with the stage. I mean, there was no aspect of theatre that she didn't like. So she was in love with the stage, the acting, the makeup, the rehearsals. She was enraptured by every aspect of putting a drama on stage. I mean, a drama production. Now makeup, she is actually a pioneer in that particular aspect. I mean, there is this passing mention in the autobiography. She blends the Indian style and the Western style of makeup and all of it. So she was very totally into whatever she was doing right from her first performance. But the socio-cultural origins of Bengali public theatre. Now, Bengali public theatre was a response to Bhadralog elitism in performance. Like these middle-class men, educated middle-class men who were, problem people, like school dropouts or rebels of some kind. These people, they found it necessary to answer back to the elitism that was prevalent in Bengali public sphere. So they turned to performance. Okay, so Bengali public theatre is largely a result of the efforts of these middle class men. And the fact is that when they started staging shows, they couldn't find women from the upper class. They couldn't find any women from the upper class, definitely, and not even from the middle class to play these roles, female roles on stage. So earlier, male actors started impersonating female characters, like we see in Shakespearean drama and all of that. And then there come these women, mostly from a very lower class or caste background, usually from the prostitute quarters. Now, when you take a look at the archive of Bengali public theatre, Binodini Dasi's name is not among the first 4 actresses who made their mark on Bengali stage. Okay, she was not the first woman to play a female role on stage, but she's definitely a trailblazer because of the way she conducted herself on stage. Her performances basically, sidelined the women who went before her. So, yeah. So what I was talking about is, there is this, origin story embedded in my story of this trailblazer of an actor. Her origins from a very lower class background. She also belonged to the prostitute quarters, and this particular origin, the fact of her origin, sticks out like a sore thumb. No matter how passionate she was about theatre, no matter how much of a part she had become of the whole socio-cultural context of the Bengali public theatre, she was never allowed to forget her origins. So that sense of not belonging is, as far as I am concerned, the primary tone of the first autobiography, Amar Jiban, published in 1912 in colloquial Bangla. So I would like to bring to your attention another passage from the autobiography. These are only the shadows of an unfortunate woman's heartache. There is nothing in this world for me but everlasting despair and the fears of a heart filled with sorrow. Now, the thing is, since we are, focusing on translation, since the idea is to focus on translation, these words constantly, refer to pain and tragedy and loss. Now, one paragraph reads the same as the next paragraph sometimes. Like, you read 3-4 pages of the autobiography and it all reads the same. There is this sense of betrayal and pain and loss and suffering. But I'm pretty sure in Bengali, like in the original language, this must sound a little poetic, because as far as I'm familiar with Bengali, it wouldn't have sounded so bland as it sounds in English. In the translated version, I am not faulting the translation at all. I am 100% confident that it is a very accurate, very original translation. I am finding fault with the language, the target language of English. So yeah, now another thing that you constantly find in the autobiography or life narrative is the presence of her mentor Girish Chandra Ghosh. Now, in those days, if an actress in the on the public stage was not under the patronage of an aristocratic man, aristocratic or a middle class, upper middle class patron, if she didn't have the patronage of a very public male figure, she was relegated to the dregs of society. The label was that of being a prostitute actress. There is this term in Bengali that scholars use to refer to this. Let me just, yes, Bharangana Abhinetri. Again, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Bharangana Abhinetri, prostitute actress. So, Girish Chandra Ghosh's presence in her life seems to have legitimized her existence and identity to an extent, because she is, she has only words of admiration for this man, and her autobiography's tone changes into one of utter despair and hopelessness once she's writing after the death of her mentor. Like, the sections which were written after the death of her mentor is that of sheer hopelessness. So Girish Chandra Ghosh and her children is a very dominant presence in the first autobiography. Now, since the mentor's influence is evidently very clear, the mentor seems to have taken a look at what she wrote, and he wrote a preface to the autobiography. And in that preface, he criticizes the autobiography or life narrative for being extremely personal, and there is this thing that he says about the life narrative. Yes, Binodini Dasi comes across as a bitter social critique. This is what Girish Chandra Ghosh says. Now, it must have been a response to this particular observation by her mentor. It must have been in response to this particular criticism that Dasi chose to write My Life as an Actress. Now, this is relatively professional piece of writing. Yes, it is life narrative because it's narrated from the first person point of view. It's all about her experiences on stage, but the tone is very, very carefully moderated into professionalism. I mean, as professional as a woman can sound. So she is from a Janma Dukhini. Like, that's a phrase that she uses in the first set of life writing. That is, she calls herself a Janma Dukhini. From a Janma Dukhini, we see somebody who takes pride in her profession and who writes this particular piece for younger actresses. The kind of stuff that she did, the kind of training that she underwent to be this amazing performer, the kind of innovations that she tried to bring herself. I mean, for me, the most fascinating part about that particular life narrative was how she experiments with makeup and, the kind of thoughts that went through her mind when she was training for a performance, because apparently, in her words, while she was performing on stage, it was all a transcendent act, because she kind of assimilates herself, basically assimilates with that of the character, and there is no Binodini Dasi anymore. There is just the character on stage. But it's fascinating to read the thoughts that go through her mind as she's training or preparing herself for these roles on stage. So these are the kinds of revelations that you come across in Binodini Dasi's life writing material. I hope this was a fairly comprehensive introduction for what will come later. Somebody who is better acquainted with the language will basically talk about the process of translation. And I also have to add that Binodini Dasi also wrote verses. I mean, she dabbled in life writings. She dabbled in criticism, reviewing in criticism, and she also wrote poetry. So this was like a fascinating, multi-talented woman. So keep all these details in mind when you are listening to the process of translation. I am sure that that is going to be a fairly technical session. This is just me talking about a performer from the earlier times whom I found fascinating. So yeah, that is about the star of Star Theatre. There's lots more to say, but I was asked to, wind up in 10 minutes, and now it's gone on for some 20 minutes. So I hope you had a quick glimpse into the star of Star Theatre. And for more information, please read Rimli Bhattacharya's translations of my life and my life as my story and my life as an actress. Thank you for listening to me, and once again, thank you, Samyukta, for giving me this opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Samyukta Research Foundation, for inviting me to give this talk on Binodini Dashi's autobiography as part of your week-long celebration of translation studies. In one of my visits to Thiruvananthapuram, I went to a book fair and I was deeply impressed by the range and variety of translations into Malayalam of books in a wide range of disciplines, from the sciences to literary works and biographies in other Indian and foreign languages. Translations are a barometer of a linguistic community's desire to be informed of the workings of the wider world, its desire to participate in cross cultural exchanges, and hence, in a sense, of its modernity. I am so happy to see Samyukta Foundation contributing to this vibrant culture of producing and discussing translations and translation studies. I am therefore all the more delighted to be able to discuss one of my translations in this forum. The work whose translation I am going to discuss today is the Autobiography of Binodini Dashi, from which I selected and translated excerpts from an anthology of theoretical writings on Indian theatre edited by Aparna Dharwadkar and which was published by Oxford University Press in 2019. I had already translated excerpts from the writings of Girish Ghosh and Shishir Kumar Bhaduri, two of the most important male Bengali theatre directors from the colonial era. Initially, excerpts from Rimli Bhattacharya's translations of Binodini's autobiography was to be reprinted in Professor Dharwadkar's anthology, but when that translation was reissued in a new format and new copyright rules suddenly came into effect, Professor Dharwadkar requested me to step in and produce translations of excerpts from Binodini Dashi's autobiography that I thought were of particular significance. The deadline was tight, but since I was completing my own monograph on Shakespeare adaptations, half of which was devoted to colonial India and to adapters like Binodini's mentor Girish Ghosh, I was happy to accept. As some of you may know, Binodini Dashi was neither the first Bengali actress on stage nor the only successful one, but she was arguably the most versatile, having performed more than 90 roles in her career, most of them in plays and theatrical adaptations of novels and epic poems by contemporaneous Bengali writers. Unlike her contemporary Tara Sundari Devi, who won praise for her portrayal of Lady Macbeth in a famous Bengali translation by Girish Ghosh, Binodini did not play any Shakespearean role. However, as her autobiography clearly indicates, she knew quite a bit about European literature and theatre and the leading British actors and actresses, and among the many interesting insights Binodini provides are those into the practical dimensions of performance in colonial Bengal. Binodini was born in 1862 and died in 1941, having lived for over 7 decades. As with most actresses of the time, she was the mistress of someone belonging to the Bengali elite, in addition to being one of the most foremost actresses of her time. In her acting career, which began in around 1874 and ended in around 1886, she built an enviable reputation as an actress, entrepreneur, and adapter of European and indigenous acting and makeup styles. The scholarly literature on Binodini has now extended to Marathi among Indian languages and French and Polish among European ones, not to mention English. There is, however, scholarship in Bengali on some of her female contemporaries, but their careers have not come into prominence the way Binodini's has. Why is that the case? One of the reasons is because her autobiography, Amar Kotha, or The Story of My Life, which was first published in around 1912 when she was 50 and had given up acting, was republished in a new edition along with some of her other writings in the late 1960s, edited by the author Nirmala Acharya and the actor Soumitra Chatterjee. When that edition was translated into English, Binodini's work came to be known to a global audience. Translations bring much needed publicity to works that might otherwise remain unknown, and in the case of Binodini's autobiography, that publicity was well deserved. That is because Binodini's autobiography is of great interest in its own right. No account of Bengali colonial theatre would be complete without drawing upon the insights Binodini has to offer. In it, we find glimpses into many aspects of Bengali theatrical life, such as the material and ideological conditions in which Bengali actresses worked, the training they received, and the ways they trained themselves to refine their acting skills, the hybridity of Bengali colonial theatre, and perhaps most poignant of all, the awareness of how theatre both made and unmade these actresses. In translating selections from our autobiography, I did my best to select selections such as such that they cohered into a short but succinct narrative of her life, but also touched upon each of these points. There were two major challenges that I faced as a translator of Binodini's autobiography. Firstly, the fact that there was already a previous translation meant that my own had to be sufficiently different from it. The greater challenge was one relating to stylistic choices. Binodini's late 19th century Bengali prose is, in some cases, different from what we speak and write now in Bengal, especially with regard to syntax and punctuation. Should the translator try to retain the flavor of the original or try to make it easily readable to modern English language readerships? This is a problem that all translators, perhaps even more than adapters, have to encounter, since translation seems to still carry with it the burden of an unrealizable fidelity to the source material, which adaptation does not have, at least anymore. This fundamental stylistic issue in translation theory, which the German philosopher theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher recognized as early as 1813, does not admit of as easy an answer as modern theorists such as Lawrence Venuti have proposed. My solution, if it can be so called, was that of using an English prose and syntax that was accessible to modern readers, but which sought to replicate within a modern English idiom the expressive features of Binodini's prose. I'll give you a quick example. This is how Binodini describes her preparation for the role of the 15th century mystic Sri Chaitanya, and I'm quoting here. The whole play is difficult and induces a religious trance-like state. But when, during his recent argument with the Sarabhama Thakur on form and formlessness, Mahaprabhu assumes the Sharabhuj Murti, that is the six-armed form of Krishna, that ecstatic moment is so full of that bhava that makes us forget our own sense of self, that those who have not seen the second part of Chaitanya Lila simply cannot appreciate it. End of quote. I retained the somewhat convoluted syntax of the Bengali original passage because it reflects Binodini's intensely emotional response to the play. Other passages are generally much simpler, and I attempted to reflect the stylistic difference by adopting a similar simplicity of tone in my translation overall. One of the striking observations in Binodini's autobiography is the difference she observed between the attitudes of her theatrical colleagues and the general public towards actresses. While she was overwhelmingly praised as an artist, people outside theatrical circles regarded her as a person of loose morals on account of her being a woman who performed in public. It was also known that she was the mistress of some famous person whom she never mentioned, named in her autobiography. She acknowledges in her autobiography that she had had her affairs, but strongly laments the fact that actresses could not hope for any kind of stable relationship or family life of any sort. What hurt her the most was the fact that some of her critics occasionally used the details of her difficult and tragic personal life to criticize her rendition of the roles of saintly characters. It is clear that Binodini, like a Russian contemporary Konstantin Stanislavski, would get into the skin of the characters she played. And in her renditions of divine personages, such an approach gave her a sense of religious ecstasy that was sharply at odds with the criticisms she faced from the more hostile and conservative sections of the Bengali public. But Binodini's autobiography makes it firmly clear that she never experienced sexual harassment at the hands of her male colleagues, who, according to her, gave her the kind of respect, familial love, and understanding that she longed for from the general public as well. It is interesting to note in this regard that a passionate plea for the respectful treatment of prostitutes turned actresses was made in an anonymous article in Bengali that was published in 1877. This article, which has also been translated for Professor Dharwadkar's anthology, strongly echoes Binodini's own portrayal of differences in attitudes towards actresses by fellow actors vis-a-vis the general public. A third aspect of my translation of Binodini's autobiography that required careful planning was annotations. Many of the references that Binodini could expect her 19th century readers to get are now lost to non specialist readers. Such references increase when we consider readerships that don't know Bengali, while those from outside India need glossaries for terms pertaining to aesthetics and to theatre that may be known across theatre specialists and scholars within India, but not outside of it. In other words, accessing the past requires careful consideration of translational choices not only with regard to words or sentences, but also with regard to scholarly apparatuses that need to be in place if a text is to be properly understood by readerships who do not know the language or the cultural context of the text being translated. I do not know what the situation is in Malayalam, but I have found that English translations of classic Bengali novels, such as Julius Lipner's masterly translation of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's Anandamot, contains annotations that are of use not just to readers who do not know Bengali, but also to those who do. In contrast, annotated Bengali editions of the same novel cater mostly to students who need to study the novel for their honors examinations. I would like to state here that although annotated editions do not come under the purview of translation studies, strictly speaking, they do play an important role in making a text from the past accessible to modern readers, including those who read the language in which the text was originally written. I hope that good scholarly annotations of writings in modern Indian languages are not confined to English language translations of them, but are also to be found in modern editions in the original Indian languages as well. To sum up, when writings in modern Indian languages become available in a lingua franca like English, what becomes particularly evident are the ideational transformations various communities in India underwent in the course of the 19th century and thereafter. Such translations also shed light upon the networks of translation that existed between different linguistic communities within India. Post-colonial theorists are often so concerned with Anglophone writings from across the globe that vernacular language writings often get the short shrift unless they appear in English translations and, for various reasons, get taken up by an international community of scholars. Those of us who do focus on literatures and translations in modern Indian languages are often unable to reach out to other Indian linguistic communities on account of the sheer diversity of Indian languages and their literary histories. But systematic studies of these histories, and especially the interconnections between different linguistic communities, can yield fascinating insights. And I take this opportunity given to me by the Samyukta Research Foundation to make a plea for such projects to be taken up in the future. Thank you very much.